I'm going to give everybody just a few minutes just to get on. I know with the incoming weather, things have been kind of crazy for people. So I'll get started probably around 2:02 or 2:03 officially. All right, we will go ahead and get started. I know my life has been pretty crazy, kind of planning for getting ready for the weather that's coming. So other people may be going through that same thing right now. So I do have it recorded. So if you ever have a friend or know of somebody who missed a session, I do take attendance, or I try to if I know everybody's names and the as what they put in the Zoom meeting, then I can always email it to them. So just kind of know that that is available. Today, we're going to focus on English, very little. If you ever would want like a one-on-one session, we could spend more time on English, but I really just hit the highlights on English. English, it's kind of, there's so much that could possibly be tested. It's hard to review everything. And so if you just kind of commit to a little outside of work of, once I give you the list of the big topics that are tested, you can go and find some quick reviews for those things. But it is hard to review everything in a short period of time. So I just kind of touch on the highlights. And then we'll work on math next for the second part of today's session. After I was thinking about it, what I want to try to do instead of covering the SAT essay today is, if you would like a session over the SAT essay, I will be hosting that next Sunday at 2:00. It's all included in your series that you registered for. But instead of doing it today and rushing through it, I would rather spend more time. And then it's completely optional if you come to that session or not. So once I wrap up today's session, I'll send out hey, here's all the resources that we went over. Again, don't forget to be practicing. Here are some ways that you can practice. And I will be hosting a SAT essay session next Sunday. Here is the link if you want to attend. Again, it's completely optional if you attend or not. The price is included in what you've already paid for. So that will be coming out either late tonight or tomorrow morning. I probably better get it done today before maybe the power goes out. So hopefully I'll get that done today, and hopefully the power doesn't go out. So to start our session today, I did want to circle back around and kind of come back to this prefix sheet. Again, the prefixes are, the beginning of words. That's what a prefix is. And if you can use parts of words to help you identify a word that you don't know, or the meaning of a word you don't know, then that's the overall premise of this assignment. It's something for you to kind of just bring back things that you probably already know, but just put it in the context of, okay, when you see words in an SAT test that you're not familiar with, remember to use what you do know. Remember to break words down. Use the little tidbits that you're given to get an overall feeling of a word. So I did want to go back and kind of start going over this today, and I'll just go through it real quick. If I am going too quick for you, just know that I will email the key out when I send everything from our sessions out. It'll be filled in for you. Again, my goal for you was to hopefully be able to come up with your own examples, because again, that's kind of helping you put the word into context or the prefix into context. But I will fill in the top part, and then I will add in the bottom part, and then again, you can fill in the rest of these examples on your own. So the first one is anti. And the example I gave was antisocial. Again, in a historical context, a word might be anti-federalist. So you probably have seen it in multiple ways. The next one is autobiography or autopilot or autoimmune disease. Again, auto meaning self. Bena means good. So like benevolent, beneficial. Those will be some of the words that you might see with the prefix bena. Again, benevolent usually is used whenever you're talking about getting like a family member who gives you money when they pass away. You had a benevolent uncle who was very giving. Again, that's a good relationship. So good. Bi, to, bilingual is a very common one. But when you're talking like more math terms, a lot of times they might use like a bisector or many different ways. The next one, cir or circum, which would be like circumference. So again, or circumvent. When you circumvent something, you're kind of going around it. And again, I noticed my typo here, so you can fix that. Con is with or together. So like convene. The meeting convened at 9 a.m. That means they came together at 9 a.m. Contra, like against or opposed to. Like I always think of contraband. It's against the rules. Or on the contrary. Again, that would be against. The next one is D, which is away from or down, like depart, de-escalate, decrease. Anytime you see D at the beginning of the word, you're thinking that it's going away from or down. Disagree, disproportionate, meaning it's not proportional, would be a math term you might see. X, out or remove, of course. Exit is a very easy one. But again, if you're thinking science terms, exoskeleton. In or ear means not. So in or ear means not. So like incorrect. Is that again an easy one? Or another one would be like irrational. I'm not being rational. Mal means bad. So like malnutrition or malpractice. Malpractice is like when the doctor does something bad and they basically lose their license. Or like I said, malnutrition is when somebody does not get good nutrition, do not get enough good foods. The rest of them, I'm going to run down them pretty quickly. Micro is small. Mono, or actually I'm skipping one. Miss is wrong or error. Wrong or error. Mono means one, single, or alone. Non means not. Ob means to block or interfere. Poly means many. Post means after or behind. Semi, part or half. Spec means to see or to look. And then trans is across, move. All right, so I'm going to have those up. Somebody definitely for sure let me know if I'm not sharing my screen like I think I am. So I'll give you a few minutes to jot those down, and then we will go from there. Once you finish jotting that down, the next thing that we're going to move to today is the SAT English notes. So if you want to get it out, that'll be the next thing we look at, the SAT English notes. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now. Again, if you didn't catch all of that, I will make sure I send out a key to that. And so after you fill in your last set of examples, you can kind of check yourself, see how you did. So this is the next set of notes that we're going to look at, where we work through the SAT writing and language, or the SAT English, if you will. Some people call it different things. In SAT terminology, they call it writing and language. And then here are the notes that we'll start with for today. So the SAT English, like I was saying earlier, it's really hard to review everything. So I just kind of give you the highlights. If English is something that you are not your best subject, you may want to take some time to kind of just look at, again, I would probably just look at the Khan Academy videos if you need more when it comes to English. I just did the highlights because of time circumstances. But if you do ever, like I said, want to sit down and work on more English questions one-on-one, that's completely up to you. Look at your scores, kind of see how you did on PSAT, maybe try some practice tests, see how you go. And then if you need some help, then definitely make sure you're finding that help. So some breaking down of what the questions are about. Again, on the note sheet, it's not intended for you to write everything down. You write down kind of what you need to write down about the concept. So if you remember when we talked about reading, we kind of said there's like the three basic concepts. evidence-based questions, word and context questions, or those analysis questions. Well, they bring out those same three topics when it comes to writing and language. And then now they add in expression of ideas and standard English conventions. Notice that even on the writing section, they do incorporate history and science. So you do actually have a few questions in the English section or in the writing and language section that are coded as science and history to give you your sub score or your score for history and science. There's even math questions that they code as history and science. So the same premise, making sure you can go to that passage and find evidence. Can you, this time, instead of figuring out what the word means, can you choose a better word for the author? And then, like I said, the biggest thing that they really focus on, in addition that you haven't seen before, is expression of ideas. How can you improve the passage to make its point? And then those basic standard English conventions. The standard English conventions typically make up about 50% of the test. So again, that's the grammar, the sentence structure, the usage, all of those things in regards to punctuation. So kind of here's what you need to know for the English section. There will be underlined portions in the passage. The underlined portions for sure have a question about them. So instead of going to the questions first, like we advise you to do on the reading section, for the English section, we say immediately go to the passage and skim the passage. Then you should pretend as if you are a writer who is revising and editing, and begin revising and editing right there on the passage. Again, your goal is to improve the written passage. And so do not look at the questions first. Instead, go to the passage first. Again, immediately start editing anywhere you see underlined portions, because there will for sure be an answer over that. We kind of break it down in this way. So if you look at the English section, there are 45 passage-based questions in 30 minutes time. That comes to right about 40 seconds per question. So if you do the math, you are moving the most quickly than any other section on the English section. The English test has 4 essays or passages instead of 5 like the reading test. There's 4. And so if you actually break down the math, again, you have about 8 to 9 minutes per passage when it comes to the English section. So just like you would whenever we were timing for the reading section, kind of setting a time limit of about 8 minutes per passage is what is recommended. It is all multiple choice questions. You actually don't have to write, but again, you're editing someone else's writing. So about 50% of the tests, like I already mentioned, would be over the standard English conventions. A lot of the things that they test you over, again, it can be a plethora of things. These are some of the favorite things, and we kind of break it down into 3 different categories: punctuation, grammar, and then sentence structure. So when it comes to punctuation, again, these are the things that are most common: the use of commas, apostrophes, semicolons, colons, dashes, and parentheses. Again, that's the most common. They love to test commas and are you using them in a series, or how to use them in a series. Like if you say, my favorite foods are pizza, comma, tacos, comma, and hamburgers, that was using a comma in a series. On every single SAT test, it seems without fail, they test how to appropriately use commas in a series. And that's usually one of the easier questions. They do also love to throw in semicolons. And the fact that a semicolon can be used in like in the place of a period, basically what's before the semicolon and what's after the semicolon should be standalone thoughts or what could be a standalone sentence. So those are usually the two that I see most often tested. Grammar, again, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, and again, they really, really love subject verb agreement, making sure that they match. And kind of what that means to break it down, again, when you are talking singular versus plural, depends on the verb that you use. So if I was going to say, let's say, he run, that's not a correct subject verb agreement. He is singular, so it would need to be he runs versus they run, they being plural, run. So it's really kind of breaking back down some of the stuff that you learned probably as early as 6th or 7th grade and applying it to sentences. The last thing that they usually test you over then is the more complex sentences, run-on sentences, misplaced modifiers. Again, a misplaced modifier is where it's describing or usually the noun or the subject of the sentence, but where they put the description or the descriptive word is in a weird place, or and a lot of times it's in a descriptive phrase or a descriptive preposition, and where they put it, it just doesn't quite flow. And so it makes it where the modifier is actually describing something else in the sentence. And so you just have to kind of make sure, okay, circle back around. Does it actually apply to the subject? And the task cards that I gave you have examples of these. While we probably won't have time to do the task cards in the session, I'll explain them and kind of get you started on them. But that is one activity to kind of review some of these standard English convention concepts. The last slide here is kind of all about the breakdown of rhetoric. Again, this is about probably another 50% of the test. And so they focus on grammar, but then they also focus on writing. That's basically what the rhetoric is. And so if you break it down, it's the writing strategy, the organization, and the style. So writing strategy, ways to improve, clarify, strengthen. So again, a lot of times they'll say, if the author was to move this sentence, should they move it here, here, or here? Or if the author was to add this sentence, where should the author put it? Or should the author delete this sentence? Why or why not? And so they like to ask about that writing strategy concept. Organization. Again, the concept of does it belong? Can you put those sentences in order? A logical organization of ideas. And then lastly, style. So again, choosing the proper words, editing out ambiguous words, so words that don't belong, and then edit words or sentences that don't quite match. And so we will look at probably some sample questions at the end of the session today. But like I said, for sure, the task cards have them. So that's what we will take a look at once we finish our notes for today. There are a couple of tips for the English section. I'm going to focus on the top 4, and then we'll probably move on out from English after that. So the first one is skim the passage as if it was a regular piece of writing. So you will not have time to read the entire piece, and instead slow down and focus on those underlined sections. So again, it's opposite strategy from the reading section. Instead of looking at the questions first, you should skim the passage starting from top to bottom, but make sure you slow down wherever there is an underlined section and read it carefully because you will, again, already assume that there will be a question over any underlined portion. The second step, or the second tip, again, kind of a step in a way, is circle or correct any mistakes in the passage. So right then, as you're proofing or reading, you are proofing. When you find a mistake, actually correct it. So don't look at the answer choices. You actually correct it right then and there, what you think the answer probably should be. So in a way, you predict your answer. You predict the answer choice. And so if you're looking at it and you're like, okay, yes, this needs a comma here, or this does not need a comma here. Physically make that change on the paper. If the verb needs to change, again, cross out the verb that's there and write in the correct verb. So steps are immediately start editing and physically edit it on the paper before you even look at the answer choices or the questions. Tip 3, if you're focusing on an underlined section and you do not see anything that is wrong, or if you aren't sure what concept they're testing you in that underlined section, then flip over and look at your answer choices for a clue. So if you're on an underlined section and you've read it a couple of times and it seems like you're not finding anything inaccurate or not finding anything incorrect, and you don't think, like, you can't even begin to take a stab at what they're testing you over, then that would be a time to look at the answer choices and see if your answer choices can give you a clue. So, for instance, like if you keep reading it and you don't see anything that's standing out to you, then flip and look at your answer choices. The last tip is about the no change answer choice. Again, no change is on about 3/4 or 75% of the questions in the test. You do have that option of no change as being an answer choice, meaning everything in that underlined portion is correct. Sometimes students overuse this option. It's the very first answer choice. It's always answer choice A. So it's an easy cop out just to be like, okay, I'm going to say no change. It looks good to me. And so what we have found is that students extremely overuse the no change answer choice, especially if it's their first time taking the test. I don't know why. That's just kind of the tradition that we've noticed. So with that, just kind of take note of this. We're not even going to look at the example because I think there might be a typo, or maybe I fixed it. I don't even remember right now. But I do want to just give you this strategy here. No change is only correct about 20 to 25% of the time on the test. So again, if it's only in about 75% of the questions, and then it's only accurate or right 20 to 25% of the 75%, that's not very many questions. Yes, it does happen, but just make sure you're not overly using the no change answer choice. Before you commit to no change, make sure you've really thought it out. You've explored all your options before you go there and mark that as your answer. The last couple of slides in this slideshow we have seen on the reading section. They are just review concepts that you can list down in the last couple of tips here, tip 5 and tip 6. But again, these are things that you saw last week on reading. So I'm not going to spend any more time on them today. They do still apply to this section, however. So the other thing that I did want to spend just a few minutes taking a look at is the English task cards. So I'm only going to go over maybe 4. So I think I gave you about 16 of them. I think so. Most of them, or about half of them, review strategies. Half of them are actually concepts. You don't have to get yours out today. You can just look at mine. We will not spend a whole lot of time on this. Just know that this is another resource that I gave you to look at for some practice of some of the concepts that they do test you over. So if you take a look at this one covers a different strategy. And because it's not a strategy that's in the notes, that's why I wanted to go over it today. So it says some questions are identified by a box. These questions may require you to make judgments. Do not spend too much time on these types of questions. Instead, eliminate a couple answer choices and make your best guess. So we've already talked about how some of the questions are underlined, and those are usually short and sweet. But if it's a box number that's in the passage, that is usually for a whole paragraph or a whole section of the reading. And those usually do require to make a lot of judgment calls, because it's like, should this sentence be moved here? Or should this sentence be moved here? Should the author include this, or should the author include that? So it's a lot of thought that has to go into these questions that are labeled with the boxes. So again, what it looks like is it'll be like a 7 with a box around it. If you see that on the test, again, that's going to take you a little bit more time. So either if you are pressed for time, I would blindly guess into these if you have to. If you are feeling like your pacing is going pretty well, then I would devote a little bit of time to these questions. I wouldn't spend too much time on these questions. So again, if you can narrow it down to 2 answer choices, you're doing really good. Narrow it down to 2 answer choices and move on. Some of these questions are like yes and no questions. Let me pull out an example. Mine got rained on. I was outside working with my husband and I carried him in. I was trying to work on it when we were in the barn and then I got rained on. Let me see if I can find one. I thought I had marked one quickly, but now I don't see one fast. I'll find one before we wrap up today. But yeah, these are, if you can get to like a yes and no type one, here it is. So like this question number 6, this is actually in your packet. So this would be one that is marked by a box. Usually, or this one's actually an underlined sentence. But if you can get it down into I either think it's yes or I think it's no, it is smart to go ahead and guess into those. So the rule of thumb is if you can ever get it down to narrow down to 2 answer choices on any section of the test, it is better to guess than to move on without guessing. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you are ever able to narrow it down to 2 answer choices and you feel pretty strongly, instead of skipping the question, go ahead and make your best guess, and with that opportunity of having a 50% chance of getting it right. Another strategy that I didn't put on the slides, but I have in the task cards, is this one. On the English section, the more brief answers tend to be correct. So shorter answers usually have more chance of being correct than longer answers. Long answers with more reading are usually wrong because there's more opportunity for error. So if you are, again, stuck between 2 answer choices, if one is briefer than the others, err on the side of caution and pick the more brief one, because again, typically those are usually correct over the longer ones. So here is one example, and this is an organization example. So when you do get to the task cards, you'll see that I labeled them at the bottom, kind of what they're testing you over. And so this one, just to kind of show you, always pay attention to kind of the overall feel of the writing and of course the tone of the writing. So for instance, this sentence, it says, because the theater was big on entertainment in the early stages, comma, it is a respected art form. And so because they're looking for what is the better way to begin this sentence. If you look at it, Should you begin it with although? Should you begin it with in the light of? Or should you begin it with since? And the two wrong answer choices, B and C, although is an opposite. So although is going to be mean where the beginning of my sentence and the end of my sentence do not match. But if you look at this one, it was big on entertainment, so it is a respected art form. They actually have to match. So the thing that I'm looking for here, or the word that I'm looking for here, is a word that's going to mean that the beginning of my sentence and the end of my sentence actually match. So the best one for this one is the word since. And so a lot of times you have to think about what is the meaning of this word doing? Is it making it become the same, or is it making it opposites? Is it the same tone? Is it negative or is it positive? So always try to pick up on little things that'll tell you throughout the reading. Again, I mentioned this one earlier. I pulled this one out just because they love testing you over commas in a series. He has learned to play multiple instruments, including the piano, the organ, and guitar. Since they're talking about 3 of the instruments, we should have comma, and before the and then the period after. So the correct one for this one should actually be H. Piano, comma, organ, comma, and guitar. So just a quick example that you will for sure see comma in a series on the test, without a doubt. All right, we're going to go ahead and flip to math because I do want to make sure we have plenty of time to get through the basics of math and then look at a few other math things. So math notes are next. The math notes look like this. And again, I'm going to go really fast through the notes, and I might skip through some of the notes, knowing that I'm going to send you the slides, just because I do want to look at a couple other math-y things today. So for math, what is tested on SAT math? If you take a look at it, again, they say the math is real world. And sometimes I see that on their questions. Sometimes I do not see that on their questions. So I guess it just depends on the lens that you use. But they really do focus on problem solving. The 3 big ideas that the questions are about are fluency. Can you solve math quickly, accurately, and efficiently? You have to do all 3 of those combined. Quickly, accurately, and efficiently. They also focus on conceptual understanding. So math concepts, they really go back to the basic order of operations. And so I feel like sometimes, depending on the math level that you're in, you forget some of the basics. When I'm working out the problems or example problems, I go back to, like, I also tutor a 6th grade girl in math. And a lot of the basic operations that are needed for these questions are things that I work with my 6th grade student on. So some of it is way more basic. And honestly, you forget how to do it, especially whenever it's the non-calculator section. And so if you are in higher level math, which most of you are at this point, or by the time you're taking the SAT for the real test, you forget how to do basic operations. And so a lot of those slides and the things that I put into the slides are very elementary math review to make sure that you can still do elementary math or basic algebraic expressions without a calculator. The other thing is kind of determining elements required to solve for a problem, representing a problem using math, and then carrying out a solution. And so the math task cards that we'll look at really focus on kind of representing a problem using math. The next one breaks down the test. Again, there's 2 different math sections, just like a PSAT test. So again, if you've taken PSAT, this should feel familiar to you. There will be the calculator section. You have 38 questions in 55 minutes. The non-calculator section, you have 20 questions in 25 minutes. If you work out the math, it's about 1.5 minutes per question. So you actually have more time on the math questions, but again, typically it's needed. Some questions you'll be able to move in and out of very quickly, and then the more intricate math questions will take a little bit more time. What I think is kind of what I guess a lot of students assume, or the myth, is that the long word problem questions are hard, and a lot of students will skip them because of the reading. Whereas I do encourage you to spend the time to solve the word problems. Usually the word problems are the easiest level of math. It's just the words that make the question take a little bit more time. So we'll look at some examples of that today too. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the notes. I'm going to breeze through them so that way we can get into a couple other things. So make sure you do know the directions before the test day. Again, do not rely on the formula chart as well. Make sure you're very familiar with the formula chart before you take the test. Even so much that I encourage you to make sure you have them formulas that are on the formula chart memorized. So anything that's on the formula chart, you should have committed to memory, so you don't have to spend your time flipping back and forth. Now, if you're doubting yourself and you need to use that formula, definitely flip back and take a look at it. Sometimes more complex formulas are needed, and they typically do provide them on the question themselves. So a basic attack plan. Solve as many as you can easily on your first time through the section. Do not waste time on problems you cannot do. Again, a good test taker focuses on what they can do, not what they cannot do. So using the strategy of circle any questions that you skip or abandon. Again, if you're able to use your strategies and narrow it down to 2 answer choices, it would be better to guess at that point in time instead of abandoning the question completely. Make sure you come back and mark your guesses. So if you do abandon it, don't forget to come back if you have time and actually work it out. And then if you don't have time, again, you can use those strategies we talked about to blindly guess into the answers. So the next one is just something you've heard from me time and time again. Make sure you answer every single question before time is up. The next 2 slides go into some math facts that, again, if you have them memorized, it's going to help you kind of blow through the questions quickly. And a lot of it is, again, the 7th grade pre-algebra basic review concepts. So remembering that circles and 4-sided figures are 360 degrees. The circumference is the distance around a circle. Divisible is when there is no remainder when an integer is divided. Factor is a positive number that divides into a number evenly. And then this concept can help you narrow out answer choices, that instead of actually having to always work out the math, being able to apply quick math facts like this one saves you time. Like a fraction times a fraction always gets smaller. So a half times a half always will be smaller, 1/4. So some more quick math facts. Isosceles triangles have 2 sides of equal length. A right triangle can be isosceles. And again, remembering those basic order of operations, parentheses, exponents, then you multiply and divide, add and subtract. Those come in very handy on the heart of algebra questions. Perimeter, the distance around a geometric figure. Scalene triangles have 3 different lengths. Triangles, again, all together contain 180 degrees. And a right triangle can be a scalene triangle. So Again, just for time's sake, I think I'm going to skip through these slides. I will send them to you, and then if you have any questions, definitely let me know. But it's just some basic rules of things to remember. It goes through a be ready to recall the basics. Again, just some very quick things to make sure you're committing to your memory. I will quickly talk about the tips just to make sure you understand the strategies. So, tip one is don't use the answer choices because they put distracting answer choices on there to mess you up. Instead, you should always fully work out the question first before you ever look at the answer choices. So get in the habit of ignoring them or covering them up, but make sure you ignore the answer choices until you confidently have your answer and then compare. Tip two, make sure you are circling clue words. Again, we always use the expression of nod, numbers, operations, descriptive words. So numbers, operations, descriptive words. Those are really important. Again, always predict your answer. Come up with your answer before you look at the answer choices. What we notice is most of the questions, and I'm going to say 99% of the questions, are multi-step. If it's let's say a 3-step problem, the answer to step 1 will be an answer choice and the answer to step 2 will be an answer choice, because what they're hoping is you will not follow through and you will pick the wrong answer choice because you haven't followed through. So they are very sneaky. And so you'll get where you're feeling pretty good and you're like, oh yeah, I did actually come up with that. And it's an answer choice. And so then the student selects it and they move on. And that's not the case. So you have to really make sure you're focusing on what is it that they're asking and are they looking for, and actually making sure you work all the way to that point. The other one is use the drawings that they give you, write on them, label them, put the formula next to them. If they don't give you a picture, draw it yourself. You always have to make sure that you are interacting with the test as much as possible. Again, you need to be in and out of the questions quickly, but you also need to make sure you're using strategies where you're not messing up. We do always stress that you actually write the formula right there on the question. A lot of times students will try to just quickly plug it in their calculator and they'll miss it. So like for instance, it'll be asking for the area of a circle, which the formula is pi r squared. Whereas a lot of students, because they're just going quickly, they think about a circle and they end up using the circumference of a circle formula instead. And again, the distractor answer choice is there. So it's always better to write out the formula to make sure that you are not making errors and doing something quickly. When you that's a question that you can actually solve, make sure you're using the right formula. So it's better to write it down actually physically on the paper than to make an error. The last tip is tackle the test. Tip 6, ATQA. Again, go to the question mark and look at the sentence where the question mark is. Make sure you are answering the question that they're asking, because again, they are trying to get you to mess up and not follow through. So make sure that you do follow through and that you're answering the question that they're actually asking you. The last thing on here is some Grittable tips. So if you struggle with Grittables, kind of take a look at that. We'll look at a few in just a minute as well. So the next thing, I gave y'all a few of these in your kit, is the math task cards. And I just wanted to look at a couple of them today just to kind of show you the concept of always making sure you draw a picture, label the picture, write out the formula if it applies, and then solve it. So this was one of the examples I gave you. I'm going to skip it because you actually, I think, got that one. I'm going to send you a couple more electronically too. Like this one. And I think I gave these to everybody. If I didn't put these in your kit, I apologize. But I will email them out whenever I send this out. This is a very long word problem one. That's why I chose this one. It's an example. It's very long, but if you actually take the time to read it, the concept is not too hard. How I would approach every single question on the SAT is write down the important information as you come to it. So if I read the first sentence, it says, Morgan's school is 10 miles from his house. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start drawing. I have Morgan, his house, and then here is his school. So then I know that this is 10 miles. If I keep reading, it talks about how he passes a park and a snack shack. The park is 2.55 miles from his school. So I'm going to go ahead and put the park on here. 2.55 miles from his school. And the snack shack is 3.45 miles from the park. So here is the snack shack. And then it asks, how many miles is it from the park to Morgan's house? So really, I'm only looking at this point to this point. I didn't even necessarily need that. So to solve this one, I know I need to do 10 minus 2.55, which is I think like 7.45 if I'm doing math quickly. This is actually one that a lot of people got wrong because they did not attempt it. It was a grittable. But if you look at how easy the math is, it's super easy. But because it's in the form of a word problem, students wouldn't even try it. Grittable questions usually are easier math related a lot of times. And word problems, again, are usually easier concepts. But students won't even try them because it looks like it was so long. That didn't take me long. But as soon as you start reading, you should start writing down on your paper is the best tip to go with. The other one I was going to show you, I don't think I put this one in anybody's kit. But again, this was a grittable. And a lot of students decided to leave it blank. Like I remember going to a college board training one time and they were talking about how many people left it blank. But if you read it, it's like, wow, this one's so easy. The sum of the measures of three angles in a right triangle is 180 degrees. If the measure of one angle is 45 degrees, what is the measure of the other angle in the triangle? And so you're like, okay, I have a triangle. This is what I did at first. I said, oh, look up here. It's a right triangle. So I know this is 90. I know this is 45. Then I know I have to subtract 180 minus 90 minus 45. Or if you just know it in your head, it's 45. Again, this was a grittable that a lot of students did not even attempt because it was in the form of a word problem. So make sure you're not unwilling to try it. Make sure you draw out your pictures and just pay attention to keywords. And it's a super easy concept. So the math task cards, like I said, I think I put a couple in there for you to try. I will send a couple more out. I think I have 8 of them I was going to include when I email out. So I'll give you a few more to practice before it's all said and done. The last thing that I wanted to look at was the answer sheet. It's on my porch. Hopefully it's one of my children and not the boogeyman. So if you look at it, what I did is the same SAT test I've had you working with, I bubbled in the reading section. And so you'll see here, again, notice there's no triplets. And anytime there was 2 in a row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There was 8 times there was 2 in a row. So if I was having to guess on any of these questions, again, I would not be guessing into a triplet. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. Again, make sure you're using your answer document to help you. And then I also worked a little bit. I was hoping we would have more time in our section, but it looks like we're going to be pretty much out of time. Taking a look at this was the non-calculator answer choices for the Grittables. Again, making sure that you know that you can start with the number at the beginning or the end, but not in the middle. So like the answer to this one was 2. So this pink one is accurate. This pink one is accurate. The red ones in the middle are wrong. Your 2s cannot go there. So you can start at the beginning, you can start it at the end, but not in the middle. This answer was 1600. This one was 7. So again, I could have put 7 here, or I could put 7 over here. This answer was 4 out of 5, or 0.8. So again, I opted to put it in the form of a fraction, but I could have put it as a decimal as well. I do, again, if this is something you struggle with, is making sure you're confident on how to bubble in your answers, take a couple practice tests and actually try this out before you sit for the real thing. The last thing that I just wanted to hit one more time, and again, just because time is of the essence, I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, is this concept. Let me find it where I put it from last week. So I emailed these out, but again, the highlights of the sessions that we have covered is very, very, very basic. So I do encourage you to come up with your own study plan, use a study plan, whatever, but make sure you're actually looking at some practice questions before you sit for the test. Khan Academy is great, again, because it does provide you with personalized practice. But again, I highly, highly, highly recommend you actually practice on paper as well. So if you are scared to get started, not sure how to get started, definitely let me know if you need some help with this. But I do recommend sitting probably at least for one practice test before you take the real deal. Again, if you go to the College Board's website on that link, and I'll send this out again today, it does give you tons. Look, if you scroll down at the bottom, tons of practice tests. And then if you click on all of the options, it gives you the test, it gives you an essay, it gives you the explanations, it gives you how to score it, and it also gives you an answer sheet. Again, I would practice from beginning to end. Sit for the test and time it. Actually put your answers on an answer sheet. So do all the things like it was a real test day. The other thing, because we did move so quickly through math, that I'm going to send you, I did not put it in your kits that I mailed you, and I wish I would have, just because I forget how much we're crammed for time in these sessions, is I'm going to send you this card sort. And print it out, hand it to your parents, have them cut it out. Again, these are basic terms that we kind of glossed over today, but just see if you can put it all together and remember those terms. Again, a lot of you are much higher than the test is when it comes to math. So I do encourage you to break it down and review some of the basics. So I'll send that out as well if you want to take a look at it. The last thing that I said it at the beginning, but I'm going to say it again just in case we had some people come in late. I said that I would do an SAT essay today after the session, but I thought it would be too much for today. So I'm offering to do an SAT essay session next Sunday at 2 o'clock. I will send out a link. It is completely optional if you want to come or not. But if you do want some more one-on-one time, or if you do want some time with an SAT essay session, I will do that next Sunday at 2 o'clock. So I will send that out in your follow-up email. Thank you guys so much for coming to the sessions. I feel like they were very fast, and so we don't get to cover a whole lot. But if you ever do have questions, definitely let me know. I will also send out a quick survey just because I like to get feedback on how to make the sessions better. So if you'll look for that in your email this week, I would appreciate it. For everybody who does fill out the survey, I'm going to raffle off a $5 gift card. I know it's not a lot, but I will raffle off a quick $5 gift card that I can mail out to the winner. So thank you. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to contact me. Good luck when you take the test and let me know how you guys do. I'll see you later. Thank you.